The chair will call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Education, Community Unit School District 201, today, Tuesday, November 16th, 2010. Roll call, please.
Ms. Casey? Here. Mr. Charleston?
Here.
Mrs. Charlton?
Here.
Mrs. Hancock?
Here.
Mrs. Lubeck?
Here.
Mr. Price?
Here.
Mrs. Thomas?
Here.
If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on the agenda is approval of minutes. First, in your orange folder are minutes of the closed session, September 21st, 2010. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the closed session of September 21st, 2010, meeting of the Board of Education, as presented.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Those are approved. Next, September 28th.
The only question I had on this is whether I was actually late to that meeting, so I don't remember missing a roll call, but maybe that did happen, so I'm just gonna let it go, because I don't think I missed anything, as I remember the meeting. but-
This is the September 28th
Yeah.
meeting, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so you want to change that?
I don't know. I would just leave it, I guess.
Where was that meeting?
Oh, okay. All right. Maybe I was. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the September 28th, 2010 special meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passed. In your orange folder, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the September 28th, 2010 closed session special meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. October 26th, I have passed out, I had a suggested change for page 6, paragraph 2. The meeting actually started with a discussion first, and then we moved into the discussion of the firms.
So do you want that sentence before?
No, I want to change that because we didn't start the discussion about hiring a search firm. We started the discussion considering hiring a permanent superintendent, and then we moved into, then the next section is called hiring a search firm.
So are you adding the second sentence?
What I'm asking to do is to change that first paragraph
The
from
first line of it?
the first line, that's all. The rest of it, I have no,
Is the rest of the paragraph staying intact then?
yes, that's all I'm asking is the one paragraph, one sentence of the second paragraph.
Okay.
The second
then the
part on your
rest of it.
suggestion, then the second part of your suggestion is, I don't understand, I guess I don't understand that.
I'm not clear.
Because when the meeting, at that meeting, we had two separate discussions. We had when we're going to do the search, and then we discussed hiring the firm. As the minutes say, the discussion ensued regarding hiring a search firm. I just want to put in when the board should consider hiring a permanent, because that is what we did at that meeting. We talked about when we were going to do that, and then we went into all of the rest of the things that are listed on here. So I'm not asking to have anything changed in the rest of it. It's just-
But if you read the paragraph before, it talks about that we were going to talk about the proposals that were solicited for the search firm. So
Right.
that leads me to believe that there was already a discussion prior to with hiring a permanent superintendent.
But that was in closed session. Then we had then in open, we discussed when we should hire the permanent superintendent. We had that discussion at that meeting. And we actually took a poll of the board as to whether we're going to do this now.
So that's where your discussion, where your second sentence
Right.
should be, is in the closed session minutes.
No. On October 26th, I went back and I looked at our board book. Our board book had two separate categories. Number one was superintendent search. And then the second specific thing was hiring a search firm. So what we discussed first was whether we were going to do this now. And then we discussed that.
So
I'm
it's
saying
as if
is-
that second paragraph in the superintendent search should move down to the hiring search firm, is where I would like it to be then.
Okay.
Say that again?
I think
That
that's
Oh, so-
whole second paragraph in the superintendent search
move it down.
should be moved down to the hiring of
Okay.
search firm area.
Fine.
And then the sentence that you would like added,
Under.
go there.
Okay.
Yes.
Is everybody,
Yes.
okay. So what we'll do, take that, suggest the sentence that I have, put that as paragraph 2 of superintendent search, and then take that whole paragraph as it is and move it down under hiring of search firm. That sounds,
Yes.
okay. Okay. Then the chair will entertain motion to approve the minutes as now presented by of the October 26, 2010 regular meeting of the Board of Education as amended.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Then in your orange folder, October 26th closed session, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the closed session of the October 26, 2010 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. All right. Next on the agenda is public comments. Are there any public comments at this time? Wouldn't do that now. Mr. Price wanted to.
I wanted to just do this because it really is more of a comment coming from me as a parent than it is a board member, so I thought now might be a good time just to kind of share this. Document camera work? Or no?
We have to.
Is it all hooked up? If it's hooked up, it's no big deal.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Okay. Sorry. For the past 10 years, a group of College of DuPage photojournalism students team up with Easter Seals of DuPage to create a photography and multimedia exhibition highlighting Easter Seals success stories from the past year. Our family was pleased and very excited to learn that our daughter, Kira, was chosen as one of the 25 participants in this year's Easter Seals College of DuPage collaborative project. The 11th annual Easter Seals photography exhibition titled Celebrations opened Wednesday, October 27th at the DuPage Easter Seals Center in Villa Park. This exhibition is meant to be inspirational for Easter Seals families, as well as families searching for therapeutic resources to aid disabled children. Although each child and family face unique challenges, the lives depicted in these slideshows demonstrate how, despite circumstances, life can be strikingly normal in so many ways. My wife, Margaret, and I would be willing to share the wonderful experience we've had working with Easter Seals staff and programs with any family who may be searching for the types of resources the Easter Seals organization provides. This is just a screenshot of the slideshow website. If you go to the Easter Seals of DuPage website, you can click on events, and then there's links that come up that will take you to the slideshow that features the 25 students that were, or 25 children that were featured in the project. We'd like to thank Easter Seals therapist Barb Krampak and Carrie Stolzenberg for their professionalism and support, and also to College of DuPage student Manuel Alvarez, who also happens to be a Westmont resident, for his talents in creating Kira's presentation as part of his photojournalism class. Kira's slideshow highlights the important contribution District 201 staff members had made toward her success. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge the critical role our special education team fills.
That's pretty blurry.
Joel, adjust it. I think there's a,
Okay. Due to the nature of their responsibilities, the special ed team, opportunities for public recognition are too infrequent. Also important to the success of a special needs child is a peer culture that is supportive and doesn't shy away from differences. As a special needs parent, it can be difficult to know how much to share with the broader community. Due to privacy concerns, a parent may feel as if they can't talk about the achievements of their special needs student. But successes should not always be celebrated in private. I hope my family's willingness to publicly share success will encourage other special needs parents to do so when appropriate. If your child receives recognition through an alternative program, such as Special Olympics, a CSPAR program, or another organization, please consider making the Board of Education aware of it, especially when the District 201 educational experience is interwoven into your child's specific achievement. Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, if anyone would like to contact me to learn more about Easter Seals, they certainly can do so through the CUSD email. Thank you.
Joel, thank you. I would like to say thank you and to you and your wife for actually sharing that. It is an amazing video of Kira and her teachers and her family.
Thank you.
And it's beautiful. Okay, thank you, Joel. Consent agenda, then? Are there any?
There is one change under tab 2, the first reading of board policy. And again, this is the first opportunity the board has to review possible policy changes, and then at our December meeting would be the actual approval. But on the second page, where it's listed what the committee is recommending for adoption for changes, policy 5330, you can line that out. That actually was reviewed, but there are no changes to that policy. So make sure that that reflects the accurate discussion. We are still waiting on some feedback on some policies. So I guess in December, in addition to approving these, we'll have a first reading on some additional policies.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else on the consent agenda that anybody wishes to discuss? Okay, then the chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. 1, personnel recommendation. 2, first reading of board policy. 3, approval of donation. 4, approval of payroll deductions. And 5, ratification of regular payroll.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon?
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Lubeck?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Ms. Casey?
Yes.
Okay, the superintendent's report, please.
Okay, first, quick update on strategic planning. I have received additional changes for the survey, and so those have been forwarded to Linda. And, definitely there's been some questions as to whether or not the board would have an opportunity for one last look before it goes public. We want to make sure any typos or inaccuracies are taken care of. So definitely that will occur before it goes public. So hopefully we'll get a quick turnaround from Linda and be able to start that process. November 10th, I gave.
We'll have to talk about that because you weren't here for the first meeting, but there's some concern about overlapping of
Okay.
surveys. So
All right. All right. We'll work on the timing of
work
those
on the
things
timing, yeah.
to make sure we don't overwhelm our community. As far as state of the school district, November 10th, the Westmont Chamber hosted the school district as well as District 60 to provide information about our respective school districts. Probably about 25 to 30 people were in attendance and very well received. And it was nice that the village also recorded the presentation. As soon as that recording's edited, ready to go, there will be a link from our school district website so that anybody who did not attend the address would be able to see it. And then we'll also, through our blog and email notices, notify people that it is available for viewing. So as soon as we get that.
And if people have questions?
And if they have questions, feel free to contact my office, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that they may have. Quick athletic update. December will actually formally recognize students and teams for their accomplishments this fall. But it was, like many years with the Community Union School District 201, a very successful fall with our girls golf team winning the regional and placing 8th at the state golf tournament. And I also believe we had 1 or 2 All-Staters, Steve, in golf. Two.
Yeah.
And then girls cross-country, regional, sectional champs, as well as placing 4th in the state. And then the boys cross-country team, regional champs, 7th in the state, and also had an individual All-Stater. And I can also note that our football team this fall did break a 14-game losing streak. So that was also an accomplishment. And I know the kids and the athletes were thrilled about that.
It was a great fall season.
Yeah, it
All
was.
around.
It was.
All around.
A lot of fun. And December we'll recognize them formally.
I just want to jump in. I was invited to attend the Fall Academic Awards last night at the high school, and it was very inspiring to see how many of our students were all conference and academic. So that was a wonderful moment for our high school student and Mr. Carr. You know, it was a good moment for our school.
And then with regards, this weekend is the Tri-I Conference. Some people refer to it as a school board convention. In your orange folder, you did receive information about the weekend. And then Kim and I will take a look at some of those events and coordinate some things. We'll get some information out to you as far as if people want to meet at various times to attend some of the different functions. So we'll get that information to you if you're interested. Obviously, feel free to attend things on your own, but if you're sometimes there's a little bit of comfort if you know some recognizable faces will be there as well. So we'll get that information to you. Thursday, November 18th is the high school Thanksgiving feast. It's kind of nice. This was one of the programs that the district needed to cut because of finances, but the Cashman Stoller Group stepped forward and agreed to cover the cost of that program. It's a nice tradition for the high school. You'll see Mr. Carr as well as Ms. Bartos carving turkeys if you're able to attend. And they have 2 seatings, one at approximately 11:30, one at approximately 12:20. And feel free to attend one of those sittings if you're able to.
Thanks to Steve Cashman and his partners.
Yep. And then finally, before I conclude, there's been some questions I know about smart boards and curriculum, whether or not the curriculum is aligned. And I included in a board update some information that I thought I'd want to share. That as far as smart board inventory, it is pretty equitable distribution, and sometimes the funding of smart boards are done with specific dollars like grants, ARAB money, and so forth. Well, in order to utilize those funds, the building has to meet certain criteria, either special ed population in some cases, or in other cases, free or reduced lunch. And because of that, where some of the funds go determines how we can spend those. But basically, right now, Miller has a total of 8 smart boards, and 6 were purchased through Title I era grant funds, and 2 were through the district pilot program. Manning has 9, with 6 being purchased over a 2-year period through the PTO, 1 through the district, and 2 through the pilot program. Junior high has 11. 1 was through band boosters, and 10 through the 08 or 09-10 era Part B grant. And the high school has 10, with 1 being purchased through the band boosters, 2 through the district pilot program, and 7 through era funds. And then just addressing curriculum in terms of alignment, definitely there's always room for improvement, but in terms of the elementary buildings, buildings are following the same curriculum maps, using the same resources and textbooks. Some programming is a little bit different depending upon specific needs of a building. But for the most part, I would say that we're in good shape as far as our alignment of curriculum in our district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do you know if there's any more, since some of that was from grant money, do you know if there's any additional grant money there for something like smart boards?
We did not allocate any additional grant money this year to purchase smart boards.
Okay, thank you.
That's
Okay, the next item is board reports. Are there any board reports at this time?
The Finance Committee met, and you'll see in a presentation later this evening, a presentation of the levy. In addition to that, we talked about the beginnings or the formation of a broader Finance Committee to deal with questions about understanding the district's finances going forward, and articulating some strategies to deal with the deficits that we are presently experiencing.
I'll just add that I attended the NCO presentation at the junior high, and it was very well done. And
Explain what that is.
that is the, gosh, and I can't remember what the acronym stands for. They come in and they are very involved with bullying prevention. And so they came in and spoke to a group of parents and some teachers there as well. And just a couple of quick notes from that. I think one of the things that came to my mind is they talked about you have bullying and you have the victim, but in between there's this whole group of kids, and the notion of defenders came up as part of their presentation, that if you can make the kids that maybe aren't or don't see bullying as a concern or a problem, but if they can't, because they don't experience it themselves, but if they, when they see it, recognize it and defend it and put a stop to it, that's the group that you really want to target in any kind of education campaign or trying to motivate the kids to be more patrolling themselves on the issue. It is a big issue. You'll see some board policies coming down in response to some state legislation that changed. We talked about that at the policy meeting.
Some of the ones that we're having reviewed.
Right, some of them are being reviewed. And it just, it's got a lot of attention lately, and just because we're small, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen here. And we want to do everything we can to prevent it and promote a healthy school environment. So, that's it.
Thank you. Any other board reports? No? Okay, then we'll move on to education. Mr. Price?
There was
Want to
no
talk about
SASID meeting I was unable to attend. I have attended a couple of the ongoing strategic planning, and that is using, I think I mentioned last time, the storyboard process and what they call forced choice. So after you come up with all these ideas, then you have to pick the best. The best of the best, and move forward with developing goals under those kind of global ideas. So that's where it's at now. I think there's one more meeting at the end of November.
Okay. Kevin?
since our last board meeting, the state report cards data has been issued. Let me get the mouse here. And what I'd like to do is highlight a little bit of information from the school report cards. And not that this is supposed to be an all-inclusive, really diving into the data, but just kind of give you a flavor of some of the information we're getting from our school report card. And then one of the recommendations I would have, I know that we're all busy and getting pulled in a lot of different directions, but we have our Ames Web data, we have our math testing data, we have our school report card data, that sometimes it's helpful to have a board workshop, including the administrative team, and starting to take a look at some of that data and some of the trends, and then talk more specifically about some of the strategies that the buildings are doing in order to improve our scores, because no matter how good your scores are, they can always improve, and we definitely want to maintain the progress we're making. So that would be a recommendation. So this is kind of a broad overview, but then my recommendation would be that if we could all sit some time and aside and sit down and be able to really dig into some of the data, I think that would be beneficial for the board. First of all, just a quick summary. Manning, Miller, and Westmont Junior High, they all made adequate yearly progress. This year, 77.5% of your students needed to meet or exceed state standards in math and reading. And all three buildings did that and did a nice job there. And then the high school did not make adequate yearly progress, but that doesn't mean that good things are not happening at the high school or we're not seeing improvement, because it's the exact opposite. We are seeing good things. We are seeing improvement. One of the things that Steve is sharing with you is the school improvement plan. Part of the process, because the high school did not make adequate yearly progress, is that they need to take a look at their school improvement plan and make some adjustments to it. And so that's the process that the high school went through. And so what you're looking at is not the finished product, but rather kind of a draft. And the high school team will continue to look at that. And then feel free to review it. And then if you have any questions of Steve, feel free to contact Steve, and he'll be happy to answer those questions. In terms of student demographics, if you take a look at the ethnic background, has been pretty stable for our district for the last couple of years. So that when you look at our breakdown by race, you can see that, again, if you look at numbers from previous years, it's about the same. The rest of the demographic data, our low income has increased from the previous year slightly, but we're still below the state average. And then also with our mobility, a slight increase in our mobility. It's currently 8%, but again, below the state average. And again, with the current economic conditions, that's not unusual for districts to be seeing that. An increased number of families qualifying for free and reduced lunch, which is the primary way that districts measure their low income, and then also the increase in mobility. To kind of, again, illustrate the high school, some of the good things that are happening there. This year, there were 42 students who took AP tests and 69 tests were taken. That's a significant increase over 2009. And one of the things about the AP program, again, it's not the end-all and be-all, but definitely represents the most rigorous curriculum that we can expose our students to. And again, conversations I'm having with Mr. Carr, our high school principal, definitely their focus is to challenge our students and to expose them to the most rigorous curriculum possible. And he's got some exciting ideas of things that he wants to do with the high school in terms of its curriculum that I think definitely it will not only benefit our top level students, it'll benefit our average students, and even our students who are struggling academically. They will all benefit from some of the things that Steve is currently working on. And again, I guess why I'm referencing the high school, when you hear didn't make adequate yearly progress, definitely that gets your attention. But we're doing things right at the high school at the same time. We have 94% of our students went on to a 2 or 4 year college or university. Most of our students have plans beyond their secondary experience. And the only way that students can transition to those areas as if they have a solid foundation, which is occurring in our school district and at our high school.
Just as a side note to that slide, I think if you go back to that 53% number going to four-year universities, I think we got an email from our guidance department 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. And actually, there's a trend there where we had been a fairly sort of a 40-ish% number of our kids going to four-year universities up until this past year, and it clearly jumped a good 10%. From 40 to 50. That's an exceptionally good sign in my opinion. It speaks to both preparation and to ambition.
Right. It's definitely the emphasis of our high school and guidance program in terms of just the opportunities students have to be exposed to universities and colleges to see that it is truly a real goal for them. And sometimes that's the most important thing is to work with our students to realize that that is an attainable goal. And so that's why we're seeing that increase with students who are going on to four-year universities. Some of the financial information that's contained in our school report card. This is the revenue source, and it's no surprise to anyone, but the property tax. Property taxes accounts for the bulk of our finances, our revenue. 78.9%, almost 80% of our revenue budget comes from local property taxes. And you can see the federal and the state sources, 4.2% and 8.2%. One of the things that I did in the state of the district address was kind of show people how those state and federal dollars trickle down to our school and why the fact is that we rely so heavily on our local property owners and taxpayers to fund our schools. We get very little in terms of dollars per student. You talk about $1 trillion budget at the federal level. That trickles down to our school district to a couple $100 per student. So, I mean, it's amazing when you look at those numbers. So definitely, we rely very heavily on our local community to fund our schools. Expenditure-wise, and here it shows by the report card standard, 75% of our expenditures are education. I would argue that all of those funds are needed in order to educate our students. Operations and maintenance, maintaining our buildings, making sure that our buildings are safe, that the climate control is in place, transportation, obviously, the municipal retirement, that's for our non-certified staff. So just about all those funds, you can make a direct connection to how it's educating our students. So, and we are a service organization, and so most of our expenditures are spent on personnel, providing the quality education and services that we do for our students. Now, to kind of give you an idea of some of the trends, with Manning Elementary, if you look at ISAT, again, 77.5% was the benchmark for elementary or for all students this year. And as you can see in reading, we were at 85.1, and math 93.8. And there was a little bit of a dip in reading, and so Manning Elementary, when they look at the report card data as well as other data, they start to take a look at the curriculum maps and what they're doing in the classrooms and seeing what needs to be tweaked so that we don't continue that trend, and we want to reverse that trend when we get to the next year. Mill Elementary has maintained pretty much solid scores all the way across, and 78.9% for reading and 95.5% for math. And so that's, again, very solid scores above the 77.5.
Just one little tidbit there. For the second year in a row, 100% of the fifth graders who left Miller last year met or exceeded academic standards in math against a 42% low-income rate.
Right.
Right. That's Herculean.
Right.
So.
And in my presentation, I didn't break it down this way, but if you take a look at, for instance, Miller with some of their demographics and how they perform against other schools with similar demographics, typically we're outperforming those schools when you try to compare apples to apples. Westmont Junior High, again, very solid, above the 77.5% cut score on their ISAT, very consistent scores in both the reading and math, and a lot of investment has been made. You'll see some of the cohort information in a little bit. And you'll see how that investment in math at the secondary level has really paid off with the math scores. And again, you take a look at the high school, 77.5% was what was needed, 67.4% at math, and 63.6% at reading. You'll see that significant jump in math. And if you talk to the high school, over the last year, there was a laser focus on math and improving the math scores. And now that same focus, not only are they continuing that with math, but also they're bringing that into the reading as well. And so my guess would be that with this next group of students testing, you'll see that same increase with the reading as well. So the math definitely is on an upward trend, and now the goal of the high school is to also start the upward trend with that. ACT, that's kind of the benchmark for high schools, and as you can see, we had a slight increase in our composite score for the ACT. And again, a continuing trend since 2007 of increasing ACT scores. And we had approximately 15% of our seniors were Illinois State Scholars, and that was based upon their performance on ACT as well as their class rank, which again is above the state average. This is approximately 10%. Now, what kind of is meaningful for districts to look at is what's considered the cohort. And basically, now you're looking at the same group of students as they move through our system and what occurs with their achievement. And what's interesting, so these are students in grade 3, and now these are our current seniors, the same students, and they took the exam last spring. It's not really a true kind of apples to apples comparison because through 8th grade you're taking the ISAT test, and that I think is a fair assessment of where students are in relation to the Illinois State Standards. In high school they take the Prairie State Achievement Exam, which is based on the ACT and work keys, which if you remember your experience in high school, if you took the ACT, it was basically a sorter. You know, if you scored at a certain level, you could probably be successful at a certain type of university or college. And in some cases, that information was used to determine scholarship eligibility. It really wasn't designed to be an achievement test when it came to your Illinois State Standards. But the state of Illinois needed something at the secondary level because of NCLB. And so they kind of worked with ACT, and so now we use, all of our juniors take the ACT as well as the work keys. So that drop-off is pretty consistent when you look at other school districts because it's a different type of exam.
Just to put that more candidly, the ISATs in Illinois and the ISAT standards for what meets and exceeds, that meets standard is relatively low, in fact, very low relative to other states and other states across the nation.
Right.
So there's a real disconnect between a child who parents hear the news, or a child meets expectations in 8th grade, meets academic expectations in 8th grade for math or reading. The fact of the matter is, if you're not close to exceeding expectations, you probably aren't going to do terribly well on an ACT exam unless there's some real interventions and some real work with that child.
Right. And we are doing things at the junior high and the high school. The ACT, there's an Explorer exam and a plan test as well that are also produced by ACT. And so those exams are aligned, and they're predictors. So we give our students those assessments to see where they're at, to make sure that they make the necessary growth to be successful on the exam. So we are working with our students trying to improve those scores. The next group then, and this one I kind of put two groups on one slide. If I did this with all the groups, you could tell pretty soon you kind of lose focus. But to kind of give you an idea that by comparing different cohorts, you can pick up trends. If it seems like we're always seeing a drop-off at a certain grade level, well, that's kind of a red flag for us to take a look at what's going on at that grade level in terms of what we're focusing on in terms of the state standards, what our curriculum maps look like, are we focusing on the right information, And so rather than possibly it's a student situation, possibly it's a curriculum situation that we can tweak the curriculum. So here you're looking at the class of 2012 and the class of 2013, their reading and math scores. And as you can see, pretty consistent for both of those groups as they work through our system. So again, you're looking at the same group of students as they work through grade 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8. The next group then is class of 2014, and what I think is really striking is the reading. When you look at this group of students as they work through, definitely some improvement, as not that they were that low at 81%, but they got up to the 90th percentile in grade 7. So again, very focused, and sometimes you had a little bit of drop off at math. One of the things that you see sometimes is the fact that when you really invest a lot of time and energy on one area of curriculum, you got to be careful of what's going on in other areas. And so it's trying to maintain that dual focus that we always struggle with. The class of 2015, again, their reading scores have been pretty solid across, but definitely that's a sign when you're at the 78th percentile that we need to make sure that we're working with those kids. The junior high is aware of it. They really want to make sure that that group bumps up and so that they make adequate yearly progress as 8th graders as well. Then you got your class of 2016, and you'll notice now these students are currently in 7th grade, and so the number of tests that they've taken, ISATs, have decreased. But again, there's a trend there that they're starting to drop off, and it's something that needs to be addressed. And all this information, this is the data teams at each of the buildings. They look at this information, and then they're making the adjustments they need to in order to reverse some of the trends. Class of 2017 are your current 6th graders, and their performance on the reading, 81, and on the math is 93. And then our current 5th graders, 95 on the math and 79 on reading. So some pretty consistently high math scores, and Dan mentioned about the trend you're seeing at Miller, but now we also need to have that same focus on the reading as well. Kind of next steps, and again, this is kind of a quick overview of the data and really a fraction of the data that we look at. One thing is data mining, really taking a look at the data at the building level and seeing what it's actually telling us, looking for those trends. Again, you not only want to make sure that the curriculum is aligned to state standards, but your curriculum is aligned to the exams as well, so that if there's certain skills, problem-solving skills that are needed to be successful on the exam, we want to make sure that those are incorporated into our classes as well. So the curriculum mapping piece is important for that. RTI will, again, help us with our struggling learners. That's to help bring them up to where they need to be. CEC, if you remember last board meeting, the board did approve our membership with the Consortium for Educational Change. That's an excellent resource. We had a team go today for a meeting, and so they're an excellent resource. You know, this allows us to communicate with other districts and take a look at how they're addressing some of the needs within their district, improving student achievement, and then coming back with some of those ideas and implementing them in our district as well. The differentiated instruction piece is a focus for us, a year-long focus. And I think the exciting piece of the differentiated instruction is that is not only geared towards, again, we always want to work with our learners who are struggling, but also for those top-level students as well. Differentiated instruction is also a way for us to really push the envelope. So we don't just want to see improvement and increased achievement in one group of students, all of our students. We want to see that growth over the course of an academic year, and that's what we're trying to achieve with the differentiated instruction. And then the professional learning communities, that actually has been a topic in negotiations. It's been a topic with the WTA. Many districts have already gone down that path, and I think professional learning communities, you're asking the key questions about what is it that we want our students to know, how do we know when they've learned it, and for those students who have not achieved what we need them to do, what are we going to do to bring them up to where they need to be? And for those students who sometimes they come in the door already knowing some of those things, what are we going to do with those students to make sure that we, again, they don't plateau, but we continue pushing their learning. And so that's what professional learning communities will allow us to do. And in closing, I've always liked this quote because I think it's so true. When you take a look at what everybody is talking about, school improvement and what we need to do with students, really, it's, and we talk about this. If you've seen it once in education, don't worry. And you liked it, don't worry, it'll come back. Because back in 1981, Ronald Edmonds basically said, hey, everything we need to know about educating our young people, improving student achievement, we already know. The question is, are we willing to make that commitment in order to make sure that our students get the resources and the support they need in order to achieve? And so that's our focus as a district, is to making sure that our students get the necessary resources, but we're also providing the support as well. So that is, again, kind of a quick overview of our school report card data. And again, my recommendation, suggestion is that as a board, admin team, we really take a hard look at some of the data and what's telling us and some of the next steps for our district so that we can continue our improvement and continue to make adequate yearly progress.
Can I ask Kevin, what would that look like? Because that does sound interesting in terms of doing a workshop like that. Would that be looking at this data?
It would be looking at this data, but also, we every 3 times a year we do map testing and Ames web testing, and the ISAT, definitely we're held accountable for the ISAT, and it's very public. The school report card gets published and everybody sees it, but it doesn't tell the whole story of what's going on in a building or at a grade level or in a classroom. And so I think you have to look at what the ISAT is telling us, and then in conjunction with the Ames web and map testing, because if there's a disconnect, we see our students are doing really well on these universal screening tools, but they're not performing on the ISAT. Well, then how do we address that issue? So basically, what it would look like is the data would be organized in such a way so that it will be focused and hopefully easy for everybody to take a look at, meaningful, and then we want it to be formative. So in other words, you as a board have an understanding of what the data is telling us, and then the steps we're taking, how that data is driving what we're doing in our buildings and in our classrooms.
Sounds like a very good idea.
Yeah.
I have a question. One of the things that I noticed in your slides is there aren't any goals. So as Dan commented, Illinois state goals are very low relative to the country.
Right.
We're not really, doesn't appear to me that we're setting a challenging goal or a standard that's any different from that. Your commentary generally was, this is what, 77.5%, 77%.
Right.
Have we had goals in the past? Is that something that comes out of the process you talked about with a meeting?
That's my plan. As a matter of fact, we started the conversation in our last admin meeting. We're continuing tomorrow. But basically, what I would like to see us do as a district is to identify what we truly value in those benchmarks. So, for instance, for our district, obviously for this year, for almost all of our buildings, 77.5 would have been too low of a benchmark. So we will take a look at the data, determine that benchmark that will push our students, and then at the same time we'd be looking at the historical averages as well, so that as we start to measure where we're going as a building, and you break this down to the student as well, you want to always make sure that you're staying above your historical average, but then we need to be making that progress towards the end goal, or the ultimate goal that we're trying for as a district. So part of the process is determining what those benchmarks should be.
I think, though, that we have had goals in our school improvement plans.
Right. And typically, right, and the school improvement plans set goals as well. And depending upon the building, they may be trying to bridge that gap to get to adequate yearly progress, or it may take them a little bit further.
So I think it's important that we decide as a community what the ultimate goal is. And we may not make it, and it may take years to make it, and there may be steps, incremental steps or goals or improvement plans along the way. But at the end of the day, aim high.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that when we do this kind of presentation, there would be a lot of value in saying, here's where we are, and this is the goal that we set. And in some cases, in the math course, for example, we're probably at or above where we as in general would like to see the community. And I think the reading, we probably agree, we're not where we want to be. But it's not reflected, right? It's not represented as
right.
part of the conversation, and that's the piece that, I'd like to see a little more clarity on what do we want, and where are we against that, and where are we against the state, which the state is not all that interesting to measure against at this
And
point.
that's part of the, conversation as well. I think if you notice, there were no slides about how we compare to benchmark districts. Because I think, we need to determine, okay, what are we going to identify as our benchmark districts? Is it going to be schools in DuPage County? Is that who we're going to identify? Or are you going to seek out districts that have similar demographics, schools with similar demographics? So that's part of the conversation that we had. And, that's part of that goal-setting process. You identify who your benchmark districts are, and then obviously the reason why you consider them a benchmark district is because that's the direction you want to head. You want to get to that point where your scores and everything about your district is aligned with those benchmark districts.
For what I think that becomes a part of the strategic planning conversation as well, in terms of the community's involvement in terms of identifying who do we want to be like. For points of reference, just for what it's worth, our ACT composite of 21.4 this year ranked us 16th, tied for 16th with Glenbard North in DuPage County. DuPage County is an exceptional county. 14 of the 22 high schools are top 10% high schools. We performed better than, we tied Glenbard North, but we performed better than Addison, Trail, Fenton, West Chicago, Glenbard East, which has a lower low-income percentage, Willowbrook, and our 21.4 against Lyle has about half the low income that we have. Lyle was a 22.0. They're the next ones up on our list. To give you a couple other things about it, that's DuPage. If we talked about Will County is Frankfort, Bolingbrook, Plainfield, Beecher, Braidwood, for those of you familiar with those areas out there. Wilmington and Braidwood are interesting because those are two schools that are actually in our I-8 athletic conference. We compete against them all the time. That's Reed Custer in Braidwood. And New Lenox is in Will. There are 19 high schools out in Will County. We would rank 6th. We'd beat Plainfield North, which borders Naperville. Plainfield North has 9% low income, and they had a 21.2 ACT composite. So in Kane County, which is a little bit further west out of 16 schools, we'd be 7th. We beat Bartlett High School, which is a 22% low income compared to our 29, and Bartlett got a 21.3. In Lake County, we're just a hair under Grays Lake. Grays Lake has a 12% low income to our 29. Grays Lake had a 21.6 on their composite ACT. So I am somewhat concerned about plateauing. We've had 2 years where we had really strong jumps in the ACT, and I think a lot of it goes to a lot of the work that was done, test preparation and in some of the incentives. Interestingly, our ACT puts us better than 77% of all high schools in the state of Illinois. Better than 77%. But our PSAE, which includes the word keys, puts us better than 84%. So those incentives that we put in place for that second day of testing, we really outperform in our district on that second day. From my vantage point, the progress we've made is outstanding. I think to be externally focused is important. We live in DuPage, and so it's important to think about DuPage and talk about DuPage, but The rest of the world is out there too. And as a district, we compete. There's work to do. There's a lot of work to do. And we do have some challenges with low income and it's actually our IEPs. We have a disproportionate sort of IEP population. And we have some real work to do there because those, if you go through the data points on those, I feel like we're losing those kids. They fall off the face of the earth by 8th grade, and then we never get them back. And we can't lose those kids. We're too small. We're too small to lose those kids. So we're doing well, but there's work to do.
Sure.
You know, Kevin, I have a question. In terms of, like, kind of talking about something that Shannon said and kind of talking what Deanna's saying, I would be interested in talking to other schools as to maybe how they would take some of the, especially when we're not making AYP, because I know these numbers are, they're not where we want them to be. It would be interesting to find out what other schools have done to kind of turn that around and to see where we could, because like your quote at the end, you know, it's like we already know what we need to do. I would find that interesting to find out what schools have done, because when you look at data that we have, that you've put forth, you know, there's something that happens. And I was at your state of the district, and you had really talked there about how the ACT numbers, you know, that piece takes that number and pulls it down for all high schools. So that's a fact. But I would be interested to find out what other schools do about that, because obviously we're all in the same boat. We're all dealing with the same numbers. This year it's 77.5. What, do you know offhand what next year's numbers are? I mean, they're going to go up.
85%.
85%. So
2014 is 100.
100%, right. That's
Right.
great. But like Shannon.
It's soon.
Yeah, that's soon.
Much sooner than we'd like to
Right.
acknowledge.
And to the extent that if Illinois standards are really not as high as we need to be, again, our reaching to at least get to those is probably paramount.
Right.
Paramount. So I think that would be an interesting thing for us to look at as to, you know, obviously when you look at our elementary schools, you know, they seem to be right on track, exceeding.
Right.
So-
And it is, you know, there are more elementary schools making any great yearly progress than are not, whereas at the high school level, it's right about 50-50. 50% of the high schools are making it, 50% are not. Next year, when it goes to 85%, less than 50% of your high schools will be making it. And they are taking a look at the standards and also the assessment piece. Steve was sharing that the conversation today at the CEC meeting that he went to was that the new assessment will be in place in 2015. So, you know, we could be looking at a whole different, you know, set of numbers in terms of how it's measured, whether or not you're.
Well, because the conversation is about what constitutes a failing school.
Right.
If you know, in Westmont High School's case, we by definition of AYP are academic warnings or academic watch. I forget.
Thank you.
What?
In any case, on our way to, you know, this notion of a failing school, but 95 or 98% of our kids graduate.
Right.
53% of them go to four-year universities. Another 40% go to two-year school, and our two-year school is COD, which is a very fine two-year school. You know, again, we got work to do.
Right.
We can do better, but by any definition, can you call Westmont a failing school? A failing school? I don't think so.
So I think it's important to have both conversations, and
Right,
not necessarily at the same time. I think there's a tremendous amount of acknowledgement across our district in all the buildings for phenomenal accomplishments, unique programs, different things that are going on. And you hate to cloud those achievements by then having a discussion about, well, where would we really like to be? So, from my perspective, I think if we take time to recognize the accomplishments in the building, we should do them in and of their own right. And it's a separate conversation that talks
Right,
about
right.
what do we want to be when we grow up and how do we get there.
Right.
because I agree with what Dan said. I mean, there's some pretty phenomenal things happening, and there's work to do.
Right. It's striking that balance, celebrating your successes, but at the
Right.
same time,
Right, and not in the same conversation, right? It's
Right.
not a kiss and a slap, and that's,
Right.
one of the things I think that we need to get away from. We need to be celebrating really hard, particularly in front of the students, who are the ones who are accomplishing these things, not us.
Sure.
So, and then talking about where we'd like to be as we go forward
Right.
is a separate conversation.
I like that phrase.
Celebrations.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I really
kiss and a slap.
appreciated these slides. Are they going to be on our website?
yeah, we can put those on the website, sure.
I think that's a good
Right.
idea.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. All right.
And the workshop, yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like a really good idea.
What are your thoughts as far as, I mean, I know we've got a lot of things,
Right.
but next,
Christmas.
yeah.
Right. It's our holiday
January or
party, is
something,
this our
yeah.
holiday
Yeah.
party?
I'm thinking, I think after we get through the new year.
My Sundays are free right now, so I mean, we could use that, I guess.
There is some work.
January
we're doing
9th?
as an admin team that I think is going to align with that conversation. And so yeah, I would say after the first of the year, we'll look to coordinate that meeting.
Dan kind of alluded to the fact that this is pretty key related to the strategic plan also. So I think that we need to make sure that this kind of discussion lines up appropriately with how we're making decisions about long-term strategic goals.
Yep.
So sooner rather than later.
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank you
offer.
very Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Kim, are you using that same computer?
Uh-huh. Do we
I
need
mean,
to
yeah,
plug
I
that in
need to-
somewhere?
It says low battery.
Yes, I noticed that, but I'm not sure where to plug it in yet. So maybe Glenn can.
Are there plugs up there,
I don't
Kim,
know.
in that stand?
In the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just briefly. Yeah, ask Steve if he'll want to say a couple words.
Yeah,
As soon
yeah,
as-
Steve.
Steve, as soon as she's done, if you want to, because you're up next, the course off.
Your two course offerings.
Yeah, the next
'cause
item
I
on-
wasn't brief.
Yeah. The next item on the agenda is the Westmont High School course offerings, and if Steve Carr, if you'd like to talk to that?
I was told before the meeting that I had between 10 and 15 minutes to discuss this. I usually would not use all of my time, but I've got some pretty scintillating things to say. No, honestly, I appreciate you giving me a couple seconds just to explain why these two proposals came forward. One of the things is, and it somewhat feeds into the discussion we were just having about cohorts of kids coming through, and as Kevin showed that presentation, the slides that are of particular interest to me amongst all of those things are how the cohorts, the kids who progress through, how their performance is. Because when you're comparing two classes, last year's PSA group and this year's PSA group, or last year's ISAT 8th graders with the year before, you're not talking about the same kids. So when we're talking about growth and the progress of a kid through their experience, that's something that we're paying a lot of attention to because we can deal with the transitions coming through. And the English 12 proposal comes because we've started a progression and started it several years ago of 8th to 9th to 10th to 11th grade English, and that sequence in honors and in the kids who are in the regular, I guess you'd call it the regular English track. And then we now are getting to the point where that group is going to go into their 12th grade year, and what we currently offer is 2 one-semester electives for the majority of our senior kids. The honors kids will go into the AP Lit and Language class. It's a natural fit for them. But as we look at it, that 2-semester isolated literature-intensive sequence doesn't really meet the needs of our kids as they transition into their college experience. Their freshman year, they're going to take composition. Almost all of them know Comp 101. And they're also likely to take an oral communications course. So our thought is, well, let's have them take that, similar to what we do with college algebra. Have them take college algebra as seniors so that they go into that experience and have as much success as possible. So we'd like to reconfigure that English 12 experience for our kids using this proposal. Won't cost us anything in staff, should have minimal impact as far as resources from textbooks and so on. But it's just a more natural fit when we talk about a spiral of experiences from 9th through 11th grade. and then transitioning them on the other end into their school experience. Are there any questions about the English 12 proposal?
It's replacing the other two,
It'll
right?
replace the other two. Yeah, we just offer those. The second one is fairly cosmetic. At present, the state has a fairly comprehensive coding project going on where all of the high schools and their specific course offerings are changing their codes and kind of codifying what is offered across the state in courses like when you say English 9, what does that mean? So that a kid, as they move around, they all have a SIS number. As they move around with their experience, they're able to track their success in those courses. The course we currently offer as a requirement for consumer education according to the state, is currently called economics. We're going to change that to call it consumer economics and replace the course. This is not a new course. It's replacing that same course so that it's consistent with the coding project that we have. It still meets our requirement. It just needs to be consistent for the purpose of the coding project. So that, again, is strictly cosmetic. Are there any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carr.
And I may. Take care.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. Finance.
Okay, this evening, we have Mike Seller from Matheson, Moisky and Seller here to present the 2010 audit.
Thank you. The audit report in front of you. I'm just going to highlight a few things and then open it up to any questions. 100-page document, so I'm not going to go page by page, but this is the audit report that will be submitted to the Association of School Business Officials for their Certificate of Excellence. This is the 5th year, I believe, that it's been done. The certificate has been achieved the first 4 years.
Excuse me, would you mind standing closer to the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
As I said, this is the 5th year that this report will be submitted for the Certificate of Excellence, and the certificate has been achieved in each of the first 4 years successfully. Again, just to highlight a few things, the first part of the audit or the report is substantially, there's our audit opinions. There's also a transmittal letter that was done by the business office that kind of talks about the school district demographics and history and things like that. So a lot of non-financial things, but informative as far as where the district's at and where it's been and where it's going. And then there's the management discussion and analysis, which again is a kind of an introduction to the financial part of the audit report, and that actually begins on page 3, regular number 3, not Roman numeral 3. I'm sorry, page 5, the management discussion analysis, which again is a kind of a summary of financially what happened to the district during the year, and where it's at the end of the year, and what things that are affecting the district as it goes forward financially also. And that again is something that's prepared by the business office as a requirement of the audit report process that's now in place. If you turn to page 20 of the audit report, it's the balance sheet of the district, which again shows a snapshot of where the district is financially at the end of June, the fiscal year end. It's broken out into different broad fund categories. The general fund is the main operating fund of the district, which is the educational account and the operations and maintenance account. Working cash is the account, the reserve fund, if you will. It's used to transfer monies to other funds. And the other governmental funds column you see there is all the other ones that aren't included in either of the other two, but that's basically a summary, or other governmental funds is summary of the transportation fund, debt service, capital projects, the retirement fund for IMRF, that sort of thing. You could see down below on page 20, the second to the last row of numbers there, total fund equity for all governmental funds was approximately $16 million. That again is the cumulative amount of equity that has accumulated over the years. If you go to page 22, is a indication of how we arrived at that fund equity of the $16 million. This is a summary of the revenues and expenditures for the district for the year, again, in those same broad categories, or the same broad funds, the general working cash and the other governmental funds. And you could see about halfway down, there's a line that says excess and deficiency of revenues over expenditures. For the year, the district had a deficiency of about $1.7 million, meaning cumulative or expenditures for all the different funds for the district exceeded revenues by about $1.7 million. Add that to the fund balance at the beginning of the year, gets us to the fund balance at the end of, again, just over $16 million. One other thing to point out, on page 22 toward the bottom, you'll see a little section there. It says fund balance at the beginning of the year as originally reported. And then there's a row or line called effective change in accounting policy. What this is the way that the state revenues are accounted for, given the state's financial situation, has kind of changed. In the past, the revenues were recognized on certain categories of expenses when basically when the state was obligated to pay it. Specifically, if you talk about the transportation aid that you get from the school and the special ed personnel, what they owed you was based on information as of the end of the prior year. So at June 30th of 2009, based on information the state had, it was determined that they were going to pay you a certain amount of dollars during fiscal year 2010 for those categories. This, again, the personnel and the transportation aid. Well, up until a couple of years ago, the state would pay all that money during that next fiscal year, as they were obligated to and supposed to. Obviously, with the state's financial situation, they are behind on a lot of their payments to governmental entities and other agencies that they owe money to. So the way we're accounting now for that money that's owed to us is more in line really with a cash basis, meaning that, you know, we only recognize the revenue in a particular year if we actually do receive it, or if we receive it within a certain time after the end of the year, where it would become available to use for resources to pay off obligations of the year. And the rule we're using now is basically a 60-day after the year-end rule. So what that change in accounting policy you see is basically just restating the fact that we haven't gotten all the money that we thought we were going to get from the state yet. And we're accounting for it differently now, and we're again giving it a more realistic approach given the circumstances that we have now and the state of the state, if you will, and the financial situation that they're in. So the effect of all that, again, on page 22, is that our overall fund balances were decreased restated at the beginning of the year with a decrease of about $760,000, again, to more properly reflect really where we were at, given if we assumed at the prior year that the state we would only recognize what we were entitled to during that year versus what we thought the state was going to pay us for the whole subsequent year. So,
Mike, as I understood it, so the accrual for revenues that we had billed the state had been, just to kind of try to make it clear and succinct, if you will. In prior years, when we billed the state, whether or not we receive the money in 60 days, we would accrue or build in those revenues into our fund balances.
Correct.
Our policy, our policy requires actually that we only do that if we actually are going to receive that cash within 60 days of the end of the fiscal year.
Correct.
So this change, it's not so much a change in policy as it is a change in practice. Is that fair?
Basically, yeah. I mean, change in policy is the accounting.
Because the policy was always 60
Term.
days, as
Right.
I understood it.
Right.
Right? So with that said, I guess on page 22, I had my one question on page 22.
Yes.
Is that $1,757,000 number, is that inclusive of the accounting change, or is the accounting change in addition to it?
Well, that only
Got
takes
a
into.
net change in fund balances. Does it include the effect of the change in accounting policy?
No.
No.
That's only, the $760,000
Is on top of it?
effect is on top of that. Yeah.
Okay.
The $1.7 million is only the activity for this current year.
So our
Doing
total
the
reductions in
practice.
fund balances across all funds, and that includes capital projects where we're spending a fair amount of
Right.
money and, stuff like
Right.
that. But across all funds, our total reductions from year to year in our financial reports is going to show $2.4 million. 2.5, actually.
Correct, yes.
2.5. So as we do, this is an accounting report, and it's, they tend to be backward-looking, and we obviously have forward-looking conversations. But the impact that that's going to have to us is, first, an acknowledgement that in prior years, when we talked about fund balances in our projection models, we always picked up fund balances from these reports, which were effectively overstated by the amount of money we hadn't received but had billed the state.
Correct.
Now, based on this policy, what we're going to incorporate into our next models is something that looks a lot closer to cash in the bank.
Right. Correct.
And it's going to be $700,000 less
Right.
than what we thought it was.
Correct.
Yeah. This is it's a complex conversation. So to the extent that anybody wants to have it, certainly Kim is a great resource, but for community members, you feel free to contact me. I use my phone, by the way.
And the specifics of it are, if you look in the footnotes on page 43, that's where we disclose this change and the specific amounts related to it. So, again, it is a complicated issue, but there's a little more information back there if you want to read that in conjunction with the financial statements. So, the rest of the audit report, beginning on page 25 with the footnotes, again, I'm not going to go through those in detail, but further back, there's more detailed spreadsheets and reports for each particular fund, showing revenues and expenditures compared to budget for each line item, as well as a comparison of the prior year. And then there's even further back, there's some statistical information. Again, some sources of revenue, property tax information, some demographics, that sort of thing, that are all very informative and a required part of the report as we submit it for the Certificate of Excellence. But again, it's a lot to take in, and I don't know if anyone has any questions on any of those in particular, on any of those pages or anything else on the audit, but I'd be happy to answer those if they did at this point.
Well, seeing as how it's 100 pages and we just got it.
I agree.
Yeah.
I will note that there's a letter called the Report on Internal Controls, which, just by way of note, looks at our internal control processes and procedures, and after reviewing those, we have a line off the second page of that letter that just before compliance, where no deficiencies in internal controls over reporting were considered to be material. So, those are good things.
Right.
Those are good things.
As part of the audit, in addition to just looking at the numbers, we also do tests of internal controls and tests of compliance with State Board of Education requirements and other auditing standards. And if there were any deficiencies in compliance or internal controls, they would be disclosed in that opinion, and there were none for the year. So.
Dan, what you were referencing, that's what's in our binder, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, because I actually had that highlighted
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So, under compliance, and so in your opinion, the district is in
Right.
compliance? Okay,
Yes.
okay, I got that part.
Actually, his opinion is that they didn't find any items of noncompliance.
Yes.
Thank you, Mike.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should make one other side note, though. The fund balances that we report for the board and for our monthlies is always cash.
Correct.
So this accounting issue is truly a annual report issue, and it will be a PMA, projection issue.
Right.
But it's not a, what's in the bank
Right,
kind
yeah.
of issue.
What you have in your board packet is cash in the bank at that particular point in time.
Can you remind me, is this something that's available or will be available for the general public, or is this?
Yeah, it will
we-
be posted on the website.
This audit report will be posted on the website? Okay.
Yep.
And Kim, will we be submitting this for Certificate of Excellence?
Yes, we will be doing that in the next couple weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, then Kim, you're going to talk about the
The
levy?
Yep. Okay, tonight we have the 2010 tentative levy. And the first thing I want to talk about is a little bit about the actual levy process. And one of the first things that we do for the levy process is look at our revenue and expenditure projections. And then we meet with the York and Downers Grove Township assessors, and they provide us with estimates of EAV and new value. And the estimate of EAV this year is about a 6% decrease.
EAV means equalized
Equalized
assessed
assessed
value.
value.
So that's the aggregate of all of the assessed values, real estate tax assessed values in our district.
Right. And this is the second year in a row that it looks like EAV will go down. And from conversations with the assessors, there's projections that EAV will go down again next year because everything that's happening in the housing market is now finally catching up with the assessments. We did get an estimate of new value, and that's at about 0.5%. Which is a little bit more than we thought. And typically, we've been fortunate for the past couple years now that the assessors have actually had some estimates of new value in time for us to do our tentative levy. So that helps because our new value is not subject to the property tax extension limitation, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Then the next step in the process is to review the budget implications by fund, and then present the preliminary levy to the board, which is what we're doing this evening. And we also, I also presented it to the Finance Committee. And then the next step in the process is to publish a truth in taxation notice if necessary. And that is necessary if we levy more than 105% of the previous year extension. And then we'll hold a public hearing, and that will take place next month in December. And finally, we'll file their certificate of levy by the last Tuesday in December. And then after we get that, sometime in the early spring, we get that certificate of levy back, and it also gives us an opportunity to see what was extended and possibly make some adjustments to individual tax rates. Again, based on, we'll have updated budget projections at that point in time and can make some necessary adjustments between our capped funds at that point in time. So this evening, our 2010 levy recommendation by fund. In the education fund, I'm recommending a $17.9 million levy, special education $275,000, tort $105,000, operations and maintenance $2,375,000, transportation $1 million, IMRF $350,000, security $325,000, for a total in our capped funds of $22,330,000. And then the debt service is $1,143,125. So a total levy of $23,473,125.
How does this compare with last year's?
I'm getting there.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
sorry.
So one of the things that we do, so that's what we're proposing right now. One of the things, the levy is subject to the property tax extension limitation law, also known as PTEL, and it allows you to, your levy can be 105% of the previous year's levy or the preceding year's CPI, which was 2.7% for 2010. So the 2010 levy presents a 19.76% increase over last year's extension for the capped funds, which was everything except debt service, and 18.52% increase over the total levy from last year. Now, we don't anticipate, that's not the amount that we're expecting to get. We actually ask for more than we think we're going to get because right now we have just estimated EAV and we have estimated new value. Those numbers won't be final for until sometime in the early spring. And we want to make sure that we capture everything and we protect the district from any unforeseen changes in EAV. So in case, somebody made a mistake in some of those estimates, we make sure that we levy more than we actually are going to receive.
It's a practice called balloon levy, right?
Correct, and most districts do it. And
As in a vast majority of them.
yes. And then our anticipated, and so, so everyone doesn't, have a heart failure seeing 19.76% increase. We're anticipating our actual increase to be 3.35% for our operating funds and 3.13% increase after we consider our debt service fund. And then what I wanted to do too is just give you a little bit of history of what our actual extensions were, what we asked for versus the actual extension. So as you can see, I put together some information from the 2005 levy through the projected levy tonight, and the blue column is what we actually levied for. It was the levy request that we put through. The red column is what we actually received. So you can see in 2005 and 6, we were in those 18 and 19% ranges and got about somewhere around 5 to 6%. In 2007, 2008, they lowered their levy, what they asked for. I'm not really sure, why that trend happened. But over the last 2 years, then we're back up into those 13 and 18% ranges. But again, last year we asked for 13.68% and only received a 1.2% increase. And this year, again, like I said, we're looking at 18.52% is what we're going to levy for, but I'm anticipating about a 3.13% increase. And so I think this really helps you kind of see, what we're asking for versus what we're going to actually get and a little bit of the history of that.
Kathy, my recollection is that we, Maureen used to say that we levied, with the levy request was basically an amount that was approximately enough to balance our budget. You know, in other words, we ask for the money necessary to balance a budget, and then we'd get something less than that. So I gather, you know, that 2007, 2008 thing is because those 2 years, we were much closer to balanced budgets than we are presently or before that. I mean, it's all I can kind of think.
Well, and it's my understanding too, that you always ask for more because you can do an adjustment if you get more than you actually
Right,
decide
right.
you need.
Well, and the other.
Use it, but you can't ask for more
You
later.
can't ask for more than what you actually levied. So again, and right now, we know that we're looking at EAVs going down. What happens in some cases, in some communities, if there's a lot of new growth, and especially if you don't have those estimates when you're doing your levy, that new growth is outside of the tax cap. So your percentage that you ask for can actually increase above that. It's not subject to that 105% or the 2.7% CPI. So if you're in a community where there's a lot of new growth going on and a lot of construction, that can really change the amount that you're going to receive in your extension. And having been in a district that was very close 1 year where they had a lot of new growth and they didn't expect it, they didn't realize it, it's can be a fine line between if you actually leave some money on the table and you can never recapture that. So we want to, again, protect ourselves because, again, a lot of this information, we're trying to make requests based on a lot of estimated information. All right, and then I wanted to put together a tax rate history for you so you can see what's happening in the district. So at the top in black are the overall tax rates since 2000, and then the estimated tax rate for 2010. The lighter blue, larger bar is the operating tax rate, which again is everything except your debt service fund. And then at the bottom, you have your debt service fund. And one of the things that property tax extension limitation law does is really it erodes your operating tax rate over time. And if you start at the year 2000, 2001, you can see that your operating tax rate went from the 4.01 to 3.96, and you start to see that trend. Well, you actually issued bonds then, your life safety and your capital projects bonds, and so your tax rate went back up then the year after that, and then you'll see that each year from 2002 on, your overall tax rate has been decreasing because of the PTEL. But now when you get into 2009, your tax rate went up, and that's because your EAV went down. And for 2010, we anticipate tax rate is going to go up again because we had a decrease in EAV. So the overall projected tax rate for 2010 is 3.6827. And of that 3.4745, we're estimating as operating rate and 0.2082 as your bond and interest.
So, in other words, when assessed values go down, tax rates
Increase.
effectively go up because the levies don't necessarily decrease.
Right,
Right?
because we're requesting more money,
Yeah.
but now it's over a lower base.
So, but when tax rates go down, it's largely because home values are going up.
Right, or you have new growth,
Yeah.
or, other things that come into play.
So the tax rate that we're looking at, estimated tax
Right.
rate for next year, is going to be a tax rate that puts us somewhere back to 2004 and 2005
Right.
tax rate.
Yep.
Okay.
Would you explain again what PTEL stands for?
It's property tax extension limitation law,
Thank you.
and we can discuss that at another point in
No,
time.
no,
But
that's okay. I just wanted to,
It effectively limits the amount that you can ask
yeah, I
for.
remember what that, I just didn't remember what the acronym stood for.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then one of the other things I thought might be helpful for our constituents to look at is a 2009 tax rate comparison. And I broke it down into unit districts and then into high school and elementary districts because there are portions of Westmont that are, in our district, but then also in combined elementary and high school districts. So we've got total tax rate for those districts, as well as that total tax rate broken out by their operating rate and their debt service rate. And you can see that District 201 has a total tax rate of 3.3568. And for the unit districts, there's only one unit district that has a lower overall tax rate than we do, and that's Elmhurst 205. And then if we're looking at Lyle is a 3.74, so roughly 40 cents more than District 201. And then down in the high school and elementary districts, Hinsdale 86 and Marker 3.26, which again is pretty close to District 201. Hinsdale 86 and Darien is a 3.38, so again, we're almost identical. And then the other one was Downers Grove 99 and 58, a 3.05. So, we're kind of all, in the ballpark in terms of these. And, as far as unit districts, our rate is lower than most. And, we're comparable to the high school and elementary districts that have students from Westmont in them.
Those Hinsdale 86 and DG 99 districts, and in particular as well, the Butler district, like if you look at that top one, Hinsdale 86 and Butler 53. Butler 53 is Oak Brook. And Hinsdale 86 encompasses a fairly large area that incorporates obviously Hinsdale, parts of Westmont, Clarendon Hills, and others. Those have massive amounts of equalized assessed values that cover those schools. So the result is their tax rates are lower because their values are massive, huge.
Right, they have EAVs about 10 times what we do. So, we're around 600 million, just a little bit less, and they're about 6 billion. So there's really no comparison there.
But the unit districts are interesting in the sense, again, that this unit district phenomenon, so for Lyle 202, they encompass a geographic area, and there's a tax rate associated with that area, and it covers all of the schools in that area. And that's why, from my vantage point, the right comparison is unit district to unit district.
All right, so now for our truth in taxation, we will, there will be a notice of the proposed tax increase. It will be posted in the Liberty Suburban Chicago newspaper, and that's going to be on December 1. And then we'll hold the public hearing for the levy, and that will take place here at Westmont Village Hall. And that will be on Tuesday, December 14th at 7 p.m. Any questions about the levy?
And that'll be during our regular board meeting.
Correct.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, am I now?
Yep. Okay. The next piece of information this evening, we have,
Kim, am I supposed to move to?
oh yes, we have to, yes, sorry.
Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the adoption of the tentative 2010 tax levy as presented.
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon?
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Lubeck?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Charleston?
Yes.
Ms. Casey?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Right, now for the financial information for the month of October. The food service information is in your packet, and again, we continue to experience lower than revenues that were lower than this time last year, and our expenditures are right in line. They're a little bit less. Again, it has to do with children's payments and the fact that not as many kids seem to be eating lunch, And so that's some of the things that, we're going to look at and see. I think a lot of it, is just economic conditions. A lot of people are packing lunches. So, one of the, and we have, many more free and reduced kids. So we're not receiving some of the revenue in that way. Statement of activities, which show all the student activity account balances are presented for you. And then the fund balance for all funds at the end of October was a little over $18 million. And again, we have not done, on the investments for October, we have not done any other purchases of CDs at this point. Again, we're earning more in our other investment vehicles and our other bank accounts than we can earn on rates on CDs at this point in time. So I am starting to see rates tick up a little bit, but they're still not in the realm where we want to start doing those investments. And then in terms of the overall financials for the month, again, October tax collections amounted to about 48% of the 2009 levy. And overall, we've received almost 96% of the 2009 levy. In revenues in the Education and Tort Fund are 4.29% higher than the prior 3-year average and 2.72% higher than last year. This is, well within the range that we want to be. We continue to receive prior year revenue from FY10, and we are still waiting on some of our fiscal year 10 revenue from the state. And in addition, the state's vouchered some of the FY11 general state aid payments. We received those, and we received driver's ed, but we have $179,000 of fiscal year 11 payments that they vouchered and have not been released to the district. So we're starting, starting that trend again this year, continuing that trend, however you want to look at it. So
Can
we'll
I ask
continue to monitor
a
that.
quick question? Last night at the high school, a couple of parents had come up to me and asked about, could you just explain a little bit the voucher? So you're really getting an IOU?
Right, they've sent it to the treasurer and said, yes, this can be released. We're waiting for the treasurer to actually release the payment to the district.
But it's not cash dollars?
No.
Yeah.
Cash has not hit the district yet.
Okay, thank you.
In the Operations and Maintenance Fund, revenues are 12.7% higher than the prior 3-year average and 4.9% higher than last year. And again, as we discussed last month, this has to do with the budgeting of interest income, and we budgeted less interest income this year than last year, so that really accounts for the changes there. In the Transportation Fund, revenues are 5.7% higher than the 3-year average and 1.43% higher than the prior year. So they're pretty much in line with what we saw last year. Again, we're still waiting for the 3rd quarter payment of special ed and regular ed transportation from last year. And again, the state vouchered, said that it was okay to pay us almost $100,000 of transportation aid for this year, but it has not been released by the treasurer yet. So hopefully that money will be coming soon. In terms of expenditures in the Education and Tort Fund, they're right in line with the 3-year average and last year and running as projected. In the Operations, Maintenance, and Life Safety Fund, expenditures are 13% below the prior 3-year average and 2% below last year. And a lot of this is attributable to the timing of expenditures for purchase services, supplies, and capital outlay. Right now, we have about $100,000 of capital outlay that's been budgeted and hasn't been spent yet. And some of it's just really timing of projects and things like that. Transportation fund expenditures are 10% below the 3-year average and 15% below the prior year. Again, part of this is due to the fact that we had not paid as of the end of October for September transportation services. We're waiting on some adjustments to our invoicing. And then there were a lot of the athletic invoices that we hadn't received yet, again, waiting on some backup. So you should start to see that trend matching more the prior year and leveling out over time. Does anybody have any questions?
Are we at the expense report now, Kim, or are you?
I'm done.
You're done, okay. Okay, then, the chair will entertain a motion in terms of the November 2010 expense report. The chair will entertain a motion to approve bills for the month of November 2010 as presented in attachment number F6 in the amount of $1,630,992.44.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please, Mrs. McKay.
Mrs. Lubeck?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Ms. Casey?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Okay, are there any other public comments at this time? Then the chair will entertain a motion to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing negotiations and student discipline, and there should not be any votes.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Ms. Casey?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Lubeck?
Yes.